Hello everyone, it is Volshok and I'm going to be doing a talk through because I've had a few people ask for replays where things go right instead of where things go wrong to kind of have a better flow of thoughts. So I don't play that much Glitters, but I played a few Glitters games just so that I would have some replays as examples. So this is a sort of like a mid-low skill Glitters lobby, and I am the red player in it. And first, before anything begins, let's talk about spawn locations, right? So Glitters is a symmetrical, rotational symmetric map that has asymmetric lanes, which sounds complicated, but basically all that means is that there are certain lanes where, for example, these two players don't have equal numbers of mexes. And the same applies for this side here. These two are relatively similar. I think there's like a 1 mex difference between the two of these. But the lane where I am so Counter Canyon, which is this lane, versus Canyon, which is this lane, has a massive mex advantage. It sort of depends on how certain mexes are distributed. But what'll commonly happen is that the player in this lane will actually end up with like 15 mexes, and the player in this lane will only end up with about 10 mexes, which means that this spot is kind of like the carry position on Glitters, because you have a metal advantage versus your opponent. You simply have more resources, which means you're better able to kill him and then impact the rest of the game. There are other positions that can carry, like for example, a lot of people feel like, oh yeah, teching is like the real carry position because you come out at 25 minutes and you have 18 Thors and you're so cool and all the stuff. But the issue with trying to carry with a tech position is that you're reliant on your front line. And if I'm the red player, I probably have better micro and just better initial game sense, especially in early game, than a lot of my other peers would. But if I take all of my experience and put it in the back line, it becomes an issue, because generally speaking, tech won't have any impact on the game in terms of units until like sometimes 15 minutes, right? Like they hand out T2 and then ideally they just want to spam fusions until, spam fusion, spam Aphis as long as they can until they need to make units, which means that if you're taking your highest OS player and putting him here, you're losing the ability to impact a lot of the map, which is why you see the majority of high OS players play Frontline, because it means that from like minute 1, they impact the map and they can actually leverage their skills versus their opponents. Teching is relatively easy to do. In a lot of higher OS lobbies, you'll actually see like relatively lower OS people teching, because most people can have a decent tech build after they've practiced it just on a couple maps. And so they have like a wind tech build, a solar tech build. But the point here is that for Glitters, I want to spawn here because I want to impact the map as soon as possible. And I want to spawn in the carry position so that I can hopefully win Canyon and then impact other parts of the map. So with that said, let's get going. I am going to open 2 mechs into 1 wind because the wind is decent. And wind is still good, and wind is going up. If you guys don't know, wind moves in 15-second increments. So if it starts going up, it's going to go up for 15 seconds. And you can kind of gauge where it will end up based off how long that'll actually, how long that change happens. How quickly the numbers are going up and going down. There we go, I can talk. All right, so I get my 3rd mex and then I'm gonna drop these. I'm at 51, but once this last one finishes, I hopefully will have enough E, but E starts to drop, so I'm gonna drop a solar just to be safe because the wind started to drop, and I kind of troll myself a little bit here and delay it because wind goes back up to 16, so I have way more energy. If I wanted, I probably could have cycled between these two, but for now, I just decided, you know what, let me just finish that. I'm going to start off with Con Triple Rover, and let's talk briefly why I want to go ARM Bot Lab here. So You can actually play anything you want on here. Generally speaking, because I'm playing Canyon, it makes sense for me to play Arm because I want to try to break Canyon somewhere around like 12 to 15 minutes with Weber Recluse, because those are the best T2 spiders. They're much better than termites are. And so I want to try to play on the terrain here. So it makes sense for me to go Arm so that I don't have to ask for a con later and I can just do a straight tech. And the reason why I go vehicles here is because although bots are probably superior in Canyon, just because you don't need to turn around, right? Like if you have a nice rocket bot wall and you're sort of pushing and killing, you can play relatively well in it, and you can raid well with like grunts and ticks and pawns. The issue is it can be really hard to break Canyon if the player in back decides to support. Because if the player in back decides to support, I'm going to be fighting 1v2 into choke points. And it's really easy for them to do things like just cloak D-gun or cloak comm bomb. And so by going vehicles, I can acknowledge that, all right, yes, maybe I'll be able to break it. But what happens in this position more commonly is that you end up just right here porking. And if I'm right here porking and I have an army, I don't want to have a bunch of rocket bots that are slower and that fight poorly into flat ground. Because if this lane gets pushed, or if I pork my lane and I don't need my army here and I want to go fight, I don't want to have to fight like pawns into a bunch of whistlers and pounders or something, right? I want to just have vehicles so that I can adjust and help other lanes and do what I can. So here we go here, and we're going to drop our lab. And then if you hold shift, this is the thing, if you don't shift Q, your commander will sit idle for a second. But what you can do is if you hold shift and then hit patrol, which is H, and then click, your commander, as soon as you start to build this, your commander will immediately boost the first con. All right, so I get my first constructor and I'm going to give him an incredibly long queue, right? He's literally going to build all the mexes on this side and then build 3 construction turrets. 3 is probably a little excessive, but we'll talk about why I pork here and how I pork here in a little bit. Regardless, I just want to give him a really long queue so that I don't need to think about him. And if we look, I'm going to boost out my rovers, but I'm kind of having E problems and I'm E stalling. So because I'm E stalling, I don't have the energy to actually build windmills. So instead, I'm just going to drop another basic solar because basic solars are 0 energy. And so I can help fix my energy economy. And I'm going to make early rovers and I'm going to be aggressive with them. And this is something that I think can be kind of deceptive for a lot of players. So hold on, we'll run through, we'll kill him. Okay, so Aiden had his rover stop there, but my rovers are going to run through. And if you notice, his one rover didn't actually stop me from coming in. But one of the reasons why you make early rovers is because it's early scouts like rovers, ticks, pawns, grunts, is because it's the simplest way to exert map control. So if Aiden's rover had started running like this, suddenly my rovers who are running like this would see him and I can't go pressure Aiden. I have to go chase his rover, or I have to trust that my ally will chase him. So I'm going to do the opposite of what he did and stop here. I'm going to commit my rovers in. And I don't actually care if they kill anything. In a dream world, they kill his whole base with incredible micro. But the point is, by having my units on his side of the map, he can't have units on my side of the map, or it's more difficult for him to have units on my side of the map. Which means I can do things like naked expand with a con, because if he has units here, it's going to take them a while before they can actually get up and attack my con that's expanding. And by then I can actually have units queued up and, you know, be ready for it. So in terms of control for this, what I'm going to do is before I start like really microing these, I'll try to queue up a bunch of stuff. So for example, the next con that comes out, this guy's going to build windmills the entire game. And the reason why you want to build windmills on a map like Glitters is because because it's an easy way to scale your energy economy. You always want to be scaling your E economy whenever possible. And so by just having one con build windmills in the back, I can scale my energy economy, but I can do it at a slow enough pace that I don't impact my army production. And I don't have to micro it, right? Theoretically, there's a world where you're like, okay, let me build a solar. Now let me build a stout. Now let me build a solar. Now let me build a stout. And you perfectly focus all of your BP. But the truth is that almost no one can do that. And so what makes it easier is just this guy. He's just going to mass build all these, and then I can micro and focus on other stuff. Another kind of small aside here, when you're building windmills, right? You want to have windmills in either rows of 2 or spaced. And in a perfect world, you would probably want them spaced and in rows of 2, but Glitters is a map where everyone's base is just like compressed together, so you don't have room. So instead of spacing them out even further, I'll just do them in rows of 2. They won't chain in rows of 2, but they're easier to bomb. And my commander is still boosting. I'm going to boost out another con. And if you look, this con is going to go take the mexes on the other side. And that's because one of the most important things you can do is tap all your mexes as soon as possible. And give me 1 second while we wait for background noise. Okay, so I want to tap all these mexes as soon as possible. And before my commander leaves my base, I want to try to burn all of my starting metal. And the reason why is because my commander has the most BP early game, right? He has 300 BP. It's like some of the best BP in the game. So I want to utilize his BP as a resource and burn all my starting metal before he needs to actually move somewhere else and go to front. And I can also just request sorry, this is another part. My commander is farther back, and some people who are comm walking, they've probably already started to comm walk and they're going to be a little bit ahead. But what I can do instead is I can just get a transport, and then I can fly my comm to the front while these other cons are backfilling my mexes. So I start to build this, but I get the con out instead because that's only 5 energy a second, and I want to just get out more cons so that I have more energy production. Right, all my cons together are providing me with 30 E, which is actually a substantial part of my income. And I actually missed this part, but my rovers got in and killed a couple of mexes. They killed a few wind, and then my ally, who's my techer, actually got a tick in, and he was doing damage as well. So I actually did economic damage with that raid, but a lot of times that doesn't even matter. The most important thing is that he has no units here, and I have map control to expand. And I'm going to drop a little bit more E just so that I'm ready. Also, because I'm expanding like this, and we had vision here, I know I don't need to make units right away. If you see him drop a bunch of grunts and start running at you, you can't make it expand like this. You're going to have to stop making cons and you'll have to start making units. However, now I have my trans and I can get ready to fly my commander to the front. And so I'll be able to have a bunch of these mexes, and I'll have front cons, which are really important. And I'll have my commander come up here and he can hold the choke. He can try to deny this mex and he can try to hold the choke. And in the meantime, I'm going to get another constructor, which is super greedy, but that constructor, this is just a Q thing. That constructor is going to build a construction turret, and then I can just shift O, which is guard, and put him on that. So he'll immediately build the construction turret, and then he'll just boost the lab so that I maximize my build power. So I see that, and my commander flies to the front, and I'm going to go up and I'm going to take this mex just as quickly as I can. It'll probably die. I honestly don't care, because as long as I hold it for like 15 seconds, I come out ahead. So I'm going to take it, and then my trans is going to die, which is a little sad, but that's life. So I take it at like 405 or something, and then I can start building other things. on my vision, I see his commander moving because it's slow. So it's either his commander or it's likely his commander just based off the speed and where it is. So I want to try to get down an LLT as quickly as possible. And I'm still expanding on all of my mexes. So this is just for me to try to scale eco as much as possible. And now I can make units. I'm going to start with some Janus because it's a choke point and Janus can really leverage their strengths in chokes, but also Janus are probably the single scariest anti-commander unit, so that if he does push up, I can just apply a ton of pressure and or kill him with Janus. All right, so I react too slowly here. I see his commander coming. I immediately need to move my commander in front because he's going to degun my LLT. And I need my commander's body in front of the LLT to block his degun. If I do that, I can kill him and I'll be fine. Keep in mind that LLTs deal an insane amount of damage to commanders. So I see him, but I just react a little slow, right? And I'm almost there. If I had been there just a little bit sooner, I would have been fine. And I potentially can walk at him here and maybe trade out. If we look at his health, right, he's at 72% and I'm at 91 because my LLT did a bunch of damage. So we can start actually trading here. And if I get him low and then my Janus come, we can probably kill. So I'll start to trade, except now I will never win this trade because now there are more units. And even if they do very little damage, but they provide flank, I'll take more damage, but incisors actually deal a lot of damage. So now my commander can't just trade with Aiden. I need to back up. I need to run away. I don't want to try to comb bomb or do something silly like that. I just need to back up and just say, okay, you can have that max, right? And I think I held that max literally for like 20 seconds, but in terms of metal, I come out ahead there. So he's going to start porking this and I'm going to back up here. And I can, fill in the rest of my mexes, and then I've got units coming. And I don't have this on repeat or anything. I made 2 Janus. I'm going to make some whistlers, and then I'm going to make some shell shockers. So whistlers you want for the vision, the anti-air, and the chip. Janus are your burst, your AoE, and when they hit, they have something called impulse, which slows people down. And then the shell shockers are for, this is always going to be giga pork. There's going to be tons of turrets and everything there. I just want the ability to kill it and to, actually do damage while I'm doing other things behind it. So we get here and I've capped all of my mexes. Or I will have capped all of my mexes. My commander is going to drop a couple LLTs on the front now, just as a safety precaution until I get up my Dragon's Claws. In the vast majority of games, 2 to 3 Dragon's Claws with nanos behind them will stop any T1 push. Dragon's Claws have 75% damage reduction when they're lowered. So even if there's like 10 whistlers shooting at one, if there's a nano behind it, it'll just out heal all the damage. To kill it, they need to either cloak and degun it, or they need to bring an insane number of units to try to kill it. And your commander will be here and your commander can just degun whatever comes as long as you have a jammer. One cardinal mistake that I make here, and I hope I fix it later, but I might not, is I don't have radar. And Clyret would be very disappointed in me. So I should have probably dropped, after these 2 LLTs, I should have dropped radar. I'm relying on my comm radar now, and that's honestly not what I want to do. So we are going to build these, and I kind of mess up here. I should have had this guy with a longer queue, but this guy has a nice long queue, and so he's going to be building all of those things. And my transport survived, and I can just use it to ferry units a little bit quicker. And I can start chipping and doing damage with my Janus and everything else. And when you're using vehicles like this, I will probably mess up a few times doing this, but the best thing to do is, instead of running like that, you kind of want to run like this, because vehicles have turning time and you lose speed if you need to like turn around and go somewhere else. So if you can slowly turn and preserve momentum, you'll take less shots from something like an LLT. I've got all these built. It's about 5 minutes. So I know I don't really need to make more units right now because I can hold this more or less with just my commander. So I want to start saving metal or plan to buy T2 as soon as possible. So Janus comes up. I kill it as soon as he takes damage. I just instantly repair him, right? Super important. And then I just want to keep chipping away. You always want to try to be active with units, and everyone APM stalls. That's just kind of life. But whenever possible, you just want to run up and you just want to do little bits of damage, and then you can just back up and immediately repair, right? It's not like I'm going to kill the lane off of this, but it is important for me to slowly chip away and do everything I can. So it's 6 minutes and I say, all right, he's got his T2. Let me share it. So let me get mine up right away. And I'm building my shell shockers. So I'll have the ability to kind of push this a little bit better. But like I said before, I see that purple's on the front, right? He's got units on the front and he had attacked me with incisors earlier. So I know that he is core vehicle, and it's going to be absolutely brutal for me to break this tier 1, because not only do I have to contend with Aiden being here and having units and having a commander, I'm going to have to contend with purple's commander potentially coming over. And more importantly, if he's core vehicles in these narrow chokes, I'm going to have to try to fight Pounder Wolverine, which is probably the single strongest like unit combination in tier 1 for a choke point. So there's no reason for me to try to force breaking this. What I can do instead is say, all right, this is lost in tier 1. Instead, I need to utilize my economic advantage from more mexes, and I need to scale really hard, and then I need to break him early in T2. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put down nanos, and then I'm going to put down claws, and I'm just going to prepare it so that if they push out, I can easily defend it, even if it's a 1v2. But I don't want to overcommit and make like 25 stouts. And instead, I just want to pork this. All right, so I don't quite have it yet. So I go forward here. My commander should probably be a little bit closer so that I can keep repairing. You always want to repair. Repairing's free, right? So you always want to repair units when they're on the front. Something that you can do that I have nanos here, so it's not as big of a deal, but you can actually just hit repeat and then hit R like that and do an area repair, and then like your commander or your con or whoever you do that with will just constantly repair everything in the area. And so it's a nice way to like lower the APM burden that you have and just automatically repair all of your units that are there. And we backfilled all the other mexes that weren't taken, and I drop a second con to keep spamming wind because I still want to keep spamming my economy. Before I had a lot of the mexes, I only wanted one because I don't want to commit too many resources to only building energy in case like I need to actually be making units. But now that I know that, I can have another con queued up to build additional wind. And I tell my guy that I paid and I want to start kind of stockpiling metal or getting ready to upgrade all of my mexes. So we can still kind of chip away. I have like a weird little miss micro there, but I want the shell shockers to do everything they can. And I still want to try to apply pressure in this lane. Something that's important is it's highly unlikely I'll actually kill him, right? Like I said before, like it's more or less impossible that I'll actually kill him here, but I have units. And so even though these shell shockers aren't doing that much, I still want to be dealing damage wherever possible, right? I want to occupy Aiden's attention so that he can't spend it somewhere else and so that he thinks I'm a threat. If I just go here and AFK all my units, then he probably won't make as many units and he might just scale as well. But by pressuring him constantly and having a defensible position, it means that I chip and I make him spend resources on defenses and I don't need to spend as many resources, and then I can just scale behind it. The other really important thing, and one reason why you always want to kind of pork your lane like this, is one, my commander with like a jammer and a couple claws will hold anything, but also it frees up my units to go flex somewhere else. So right now, this is sort of like a 2v2, right? It's orange and yellow versus purple and whatever that is, light green. But if I flex over, then it becomes a 3v2, and then we might be able to deal more damage. And Aiden will have a hard time pushing up here. So what I'm doing by porking this is, one, protecting my lane, but also I'm providing myself the ability to affect other parts of the map with the units that I have. So we're gonna get our T2 con, and we're gonna queue all the mexes, which is a little bit of a mistake. I'll fix it in a second. And then look at where all these mexes are. Right? A bunch of these mexes are away from any BP. But I still want to upgrade all my mexes as soon as possible. So the easiest thing for me to do is just drop a bunch of tier 1 constructors and then have them follow this tier 2 constructor, right? I can literally select them and right click and they'll guard. That's the guard icon. And then as he goes and upgrades all these mexes and does everything else, they'll just follow him around and they'll just boost it. And I want that because upgrading tier 2 mexes is the single most important thing that you can do as soon as you get your T2 constructor. So, like I said before, I pork this, I feel relatively safe here. I've got the claws, I've got nanos, I'm about to have a jammer finish. My commander can stay here. And then I'm gonna flex over with my army. And it's not like I have a big scary army, right? Like if a bunch of stouts run at me, I'm dead, but he has units and I have units. So we might as well just go in this lane and we might as well just win harder. So I can go help him in this lane while my defenses hold here. And even though he's like trying to chip me with like artillery, it doesn't really matter. One sort of discussion I'll have really quick is what should you do when you get your T2 con? And there's sort of like a mixture of 3 different things that you can potentially do. So what you always want to do is upgrade your 3 starting mexes. And then after you've upgraded your 3 starting mexes, there's kind of a separate series of paths. If you're getting pressured really, really hard, you need to just make T1 units, right? So you basically click stout, click repeat, and you use the metal boost that you have from here to just send units to the front, right? Because that means like you're probably dying and it's like, all right, just make units, right? If you're getting pressured, but you're not dying, but you're worried that you might die soon, you can get your 3 mexes and then you can drop your tier 2 lab. And it's okay to do that if you're not breaking immediately, because things like hounds or Sheldons are really cheap energy wise. So you don't actually need a strong T2 economy to make just a few T2 units to sort of either save yourself or pressure the enemy. But you can't make more expensive T2 units, right? So that's sort of like the middle ground of it. And then the third option is before you do anything else, you're going to cap your 3 and then you're just going to drop a fusion. And that's the most efficient thing to do, because that means that when you drop your tier 2 lab, you can kind of make any T2 unit and you'll have the E income for it. And it just boosts your overall economy much, much quicker. So that's what I'm going to go for here, because I'm not worried about my front breaking. It's porked. My commander's there. I have a jammer. We're completely safe. And then I'm not going to make any more units, right? I don't need to. There's no reason for me to spend metal on something else, because I want to dedicate all the metal that I was storing to upgrading my T2 mexes. Something that I think a lot of people get stuck on is they're like, oh, I have a T2 con really early, or, you know, it's like I have this quick T2 con, but having a T2 con or having a T2 lab by itself is utterly meaningless. You have to upgrade all of your starting mexes. A T2 mex is 620 metal. So to upgrade all of these is 1800 metal. If you're trying to produce units while doing that, you're going to stall forever. So you want to, if anything, like eat your T1 lab, and you just want to get these mexes up as soon as possible, because the income difference is absurd, right? It's you go from 1.0 to 4.0. So instead of 1.8 metal a second, you end up with 7.3. So when you get your T2 con, we're going to upgrade all of those. And yeah. What? Sorry, ignore monkey. There'll probably be some pings as well. Oh, and so I'm pushing. I lose a few units to D guns. All right, next thing. I have the dragon's claws, right? Or those aren't the claws. I have 3 claws. If I only have those claws there, when Aiden pushes up, if he like wants to degun, for example, he knows that all of those are claws, so he can just run up and kill him. But what you can do is you can pair them with teeth, which are just the walls, and I'm just going to scatter them around. And it's not like they're going to block shots or anything, but what they do is they confuse the attacker. Now if Aiden tries to cloak up and degun, there's going to be all these walls and he won't know which one is real. And if he's trying to kill him with artillery, he's going to have to shoot every single one very slowly, and it's just a time consuming and APM consuming process, which gives me time to react or do anything else. One other thing that I didn't mention, and I should have done it on the opposing cliff, is you've probably seen or been in games where someone flies a Wolverine or an artillery up here, and then that artillery units will start like shooting and being annoying, and sometimes they can deny your 3.2 max. You can build low ground LLTs like this, where it's really hard for anyone on the other side to actually hit it, because a lot of times like the shots will kind of like hit here, and even if they're up on top, it's a little weird because the vision doesn't see the base, so it's kind of like a stealth LLT in a sense. But if they land a Wolverine, your LLT just kills it. So you can have one there and you can have one here, and then that is just an easy way for you to like not necessarily deny that strategy, but at least like be prepared for it, and you'll kill the first one and you'll make them have to like bring an additional one later. All right, and so yeah, you can see I'm queuing up my mexes, and then I'm going to queue up my fusion, and then I'm going to queue up all the remaining mexes. And I'm still going to try to just, you know, help over here, just chip a bit. I'm not doing a ton of damage. I doubt I've done very much damage this game at all, right? But I'm still not idling my units, right? I'm still trying to do everything I can with what I have just to apply pressure. And it helps yellow win harder, right? I'm able to kind of boost him and just help out. I think I hopefully don't finish all of these, but I queue up a bunch of anti-air here, and I hopefully cancel it and just build that chainsaw, because that's a hilarious amount. I think I probably just like clicked really quick, not thinking about it. But on your front, I would always recommend having a bit of AA. Specific to Counter Canyon, I think it's amazing to have a bunch of AA here, even if it's just like a few nettles kind of scattered around, or in my case, a crossbow here. It's really important to have. So there's a couple of reasons. One, just on glitters, these block LOS, or these block like LOS and radar. And so one of the most common bombing runs is for the air player to kind of like go like this and then pop out, because it's more of a, like, they spend less time in vision, right? And so they can just like pop out and bomb. So they could bomb your front line, or more likely they're going to try to kill something else here. So if you have preemptive AA here, it lets you deal damage either to their bombers or to their fighters, right? If the fighters fly over first and you kill, you know, even just a few fighters, it'll positively impact the game for your air player. Alternatively, one thing that when you start to play with like really good air players is they will abuse shurikens, which are like one of the strongest units in the entire game. And what they'll do is, like, if you're here and there's an army here, they'll just fly their shuris in and stun them and then just run back, right? And then you can come up and deal damage, and you guys can kind of like, there's like a symbiotic relationship where they'll sort of help you control your lane with shuris, and then you can leverage the EMP and deal damage to them. But what happens when they use shuris is the opposing air player is going to send their fighters to kill them. So what I can do is, if I have a bunch of AA here, it creates an area where I can support my air player. And if fighters come to kill the shuris, his shuris just run back, and then my AA kills it. Or if he has shuris and fighters, and then his fighters are coming here, and the other fighters are coming here, they can fight over my AA, and I can just help secure air superiority for my air player. I think why I dropped this mini now that I've zoomed out is that it's like 9 minutes and my air player doesn't really have any fighters. And so I'm like, all right, well, you know, you can either angrily ping him, or you can just, you know, kind of do your best to prepare. So still trying to use these units over here and do a bit there. And then I want to, oh, I actually kind of missed micro here. I want to drop my fusion blueprint, and then I want to just keep moving on. So the easy way to do this, at least on grid, is it's next. I think it's like called next order or something. Hold on, let's look. N. Skip to next in queue. So for example, I have all of these queued up. If I hit N right now, which I will do in a bit, but I don't do right now, so it's a horrible example, is my T2 con is just going to go here and upgrade that. And that's what I want to do because I have all these queued, and my T2 con doesn't need to spend any time in base. The only reason he needed to be here was to upgrade these mexes and then drop the blueprint for the fusion. And then my in-base BP can finish that. What I want him to do instead is go upgrade all these mexes and bring all the T1 cons along with it, right? And my BP in base will finish it. But I APM stall, and that's life. Happens to us all. So, God, I really hope I cancel these. So yeah, I'm just gonna drop hopefully the one crossbow and maybe like a few nettles, but then I kind of have a little bit of an aerial superiority zone. And we're still doing what we can here. But I've got all my mexes, and Aiden, I haven't really seen anything from, so I kind of need to get more information from him. I ideally probably could have brought my artillery bots over and done a bit there, but I feel like I'm helping yellow with them here. So I want to try to help him, you know, win harder. Alternatively, I could be pressuring Aiden, but I'm not that worried about him because if you remember, he has a massive mechs disadvantage and I have a massive mechs advantage. So if we're both sitting back and ecoing, I'm going to win unless he vastly outskills me, right? And I'm confident enough to say that, okay, I just have a better economy. If you want to scale and wait, I can scale and wait, right? He's not going to break my position because I fortified it. So my army is over here helping. But ideally, it would be nice for me to get a little bit more information from him, or like about what he has and what's defending there. You guys will note I ate my T1 lab. I don't think I actually noted that, but that's something you always want to do, right? If you're not using it, just eat it and then put the metal into something else. Here I do an awful job of managing my economy. I'm M-stalling while I have 2 solars that I can eat, and I'm trying to build another nano. What I should do here, and I probably do later, is you just eat the 2 solars. So you hit E, hold Alt, start on the solar and drag, and then you'll only eat the 2 solars. All right, let us charge ahead. So my artillery actually is able to do things like, because he didn't have artillery, my artillery is able to do things like snipe the twin guard, right? And I can just help him push. All right. Whenever you see those big explosions on the front line, you need to be really cognizant of what it entails. So for example, we are winning our lane here, but he just lost his commander. Well, if you look at these 2 colors, they just lost both their commanders on the front. And blue is right here, which means that this lane is going to be in a bit of trouble. So we need to try to still pressure here so that ideally we can pull blue over if possible. But we just need to be aware of that, like, okay, this is a problem. Potentially I could like trans my commander over and maybe do something, but my eco player has hounds on the front, and so hopefully he can slow this down and they can contest the Rex. All right. So this is all just kind of standard frontline stuff, but let's talk about my thought process. I still don't feel like I'm getting pressured. I feel like we're at least winning our side of the map. So I want to keep trying to scale as much as possible. I have BP in the back of my base. I'm not going to build a lab back here. I keep the BP in the back of my base specifically to scale my energy economy. So I'll probably add a few more nanos, but these nanos are literally going to be dedicated to just like fusion converter, APHIS converter, etc. Right? If you're a frontline, I would say as a general rule, don't go APHIS first, because by doing that, you kill all tempo and you don't have any units for a while. There are situations where you can, but just as a general guideline, at least for this position, for the people who will be watching this video, always just go fusion first. Don't try to just like greed drop an APHIS. So I've had these units for whatever 5 minutes, and I've lost a few of them, but they've at least contributed a bit. I helped him kind of crush his lane, at least do some damage on his lane. And I am still building metals, not my best work. Okay, so monkey with his standard ping. I'm M-stalling, right? And my fusion is about to finish, but I won't actually be able to make a T2 converter to capture more of its energy because T2 converters are 380 metal, and I want to put that metal into things like advanced metal extractors, or I want to, you know, like build other things on the front. So what I can do instead, just to prepare for it, is start dropping a bunch of tier 1 converters, because T1 converters are 1 metal and they're only 1000 E. So because I have available E, I can just drop a bunch of T1 converters, and then they're not firing now, but once my fusion finishes, they'll all fire. And then I don't need to burn metal getting a T2 converter to convert all the energy. I can just use the T1. So for now, we're just chilling. We are just waiting for our fusion to come online, and then we want to build a forward lab because we already have the BP, and we want to utilize our back lab for energy production, and we want to utilize our forward lab for T2 units. So we see a Tsar, which is concerning, but Mink has his comm here. If his comm doesn't degun this, I need to immediately come over. Aiden, for whatever reason, APM stalls and doesn't have like a jammer and other things with it, so Mink can just come up and degun it. But I had already started to walk my comm just because the easiest way to counter a Thor is just to degun it. You just need to be kind of safe and cognizant about it. So I got all of my converters up. Not all of them, but I got a bunch of them up, and most of them are firing, and that's because this is finished. Now I'm going to start floating a ton of metal. So I want to get my T2 lab up, and I need to start trying to win my lane, right? I acknowledge that, okay, I can't win it in T1. I need to try to win. I need to try to win it in T2. And especially with all of the terrain here, you can just abuse Recluse and Webbers to do it. So yellow and orange are kind of having to control a lot of this front because brown, I mean, he's the brown player, right? He's the lowest OS, so he's going to struggle naturally versus like their blue player who's the highest OS. So they have to flex over, and I just need to be aware that I might need to flex over as well. But when we zoom out, we can be a little bit happy because like our pink player is actually doing relatively well versus their green player. Right, he's got the 3.2 mechs, which is a pretty big swing. It doesn't quite equalize the mechs difference, but at least he's doing decently well. But now for me, I'm going to make a T2 con to run back and build stuff, but then it's time to just spam Recluse and spam Webbers. I also drop a T1 bot lab on front because I want to tick spam. And once it's up, I don't know if I do this or not, but ideally you only want like 1 or maybe 2 nanos on it. And the reason why is the ticks here aren't for damage or anything else. They're just for LOS. Recluse have awful LOS, but they have much better range, right? So their LOS, their line of sight is 440, their range is 600, so they can shoot much farther than they can see. So the tick spam is one to get information here, but it also is so that my Recluse, when they're up high and they don't have vision, they can cross the cliff and then they can shoot down and kill anything that's below, and I don't need to like risk them dying or anything else. Okay, I realize that I'm floating a ton of metal and I don't like it. So I'm going to drop a frontline fusion. Generally speaking, this isn't the best thing to do. To be honest, like you want your energy production in back, but I kind of miss micro this, and I should have grabbed my transport, grabbed it and run back. But I think I like hit my transport hotkey because I have auto groups and it didn't select or something, or like I must have unselected it. So I was like, oh, I don't have transport. I'll just drop my metal on the front because I don't want to float too much metal, and then I can always build the stuff in back later. And another thing that you want to get in the habit of, I don't know if I mentioned my e-storage before actually, but in terms of standard timings on most maps, around 5 minutes, I'd recommend you get an energy storage, and you want the e-store especially for like wind economy, but also for commander play. A huge part of me controlling this just with my commander is my ability to degun and my ability to cloak under a jammer. Degun is 500 energy, cloak is 100 energy while standing still, 1000 energy while moving. So I need that buffer, that extra 6000 energy that an e-store gets me, so that if tanks are coming up or if something else is coming up, I can cloak, get in position, and then degun it. So around 5 minutes, I'd recommend you get an e-store. Around 6 minutes, you want to try to buy T2 if you're on a roll map. I think my guy, like, I sent the medal just because I had it at like 550 or something, but around around 6 minutes, buy T2. Then after you get your first fusion, which actually was here, so that's kind of a mistake on my part, you want to do 2 checks, right? You get your fusion, you want to get anti-nuke if you need it, and you want to get anti-stealth if you need it. So on glitters, a lot of times, if you don't have a forward base, you actually don't need anti-nuke because your tech player will build it, right? And so your anti covers this, and so your bases are safe. But if you're playing Canyon, a lot of times you won't be safe. So you need to think about actually getting an anti-nuke. The second thing is anti-stealth, right? Spies will get vision, which is an issue, and they can emp things. But also, if you're not careful and there's gaps in your front line, gremlins can sneak through, kind of like this. They can get in the back and then they can kill your eco. And tracers and nemesis, which are the anti-stealth buildings, are really cheap. So moral of the story, after you finish your first APHIS, think about getting anti-nuke, think about getting anti-stealth, and think about getting anti-air, which I already have here, but I should also make a little bit of flak. All right, and for now, I just want to collect a few spiders so that I can pressure and like do damage. My eco player has had these hounds and he's moving sort of back and forth, and he's going to start chipping away, but I don't really even need to worry about it. Once my spiders are here, then I can do everything I want to do. So I finally figure out what my con is doing, and I fly him up here instead so that I can build E in back, or build everything in back. Okay. So I'm still a little concerned about this, but my goal right now is to try to kill King. And I've got the spiders, I've got the spam, so I need to just leverage the strengths that I have and do this. So Recluse, you never want them on the flats, right? You need to abuse the terrain. When they're up here, they can just shoot down and kill all of this. But more importantly, one of the biggest threats to T2 units is getting degunned. But deguns only have 250 range, and that range snaps to terrain, which is a fancy way of saying that they're gonna spend 250 range shooting halfway up the cliff, which means that when you're on top of these cliffs, you're not degunnable, right? You can just hide up here and shoot everything and they can't degun you. And other units, it'll be really difficult for them to hit you. You can just abuse this, right? I can run up, fire the salvos, and then run back if I don't kill something. So I want to slowly pick away at this. And most of the commands I'm using here are just going to be fight commands, right? You just hit F and you drag like that, and then they'll walk until they're in range, and then they can shoot. And I want to start chipping away at the front and just pushing in. And this whole time, I'm just going to have like a tick or two running in to just, you know, see what's going on. So I know that that is a pop-up, so I can kill it. And I know that this is a pop-up because they keep shooting at my ticks. Another benefit is that when pop-ups are up, they lose their damage reduction. So when they shoot at that tick, I can actually deal full damage to them. All right, I'm gonna finish this one just because I can, and then I'm gonna full commit right actually here. So this is a mistake on my part. I think I probably could have built more spiders and hard committed here instead. What I'm going to do is finish this fusion, but I'm also going to queue up a ton of fusion in my back, and I'm going to do it inefficiently on purpose. So if you look at this guy's queue, it's literally build a converter, build a fusion, build a converter, build a fusion. If you have two cons, it's actually better, but I want the walking distance where he's kind of like running back and forth and he's being a little bit less efficient, because I actually want to like be building units while that's happening. It's more efficient though if you have 2 cons and they just like drop blueprints, then build everything else. But I don't want to scale right now. I want to try to like keep inflicting damage, and I want to try to win my lane, right? So all we're going to do is keep pushing. And I'm actually okay to go relatively deep with spiders because they have emp resistance. One of the biggest counters to early T2 are Shuris, right? And so like if you have bulls running down here and they don't have AA with them, even just a couple Shuris will fly over and stun them, and it's a huge metal donation. But spiders like Recluse have 87% emp resistance. It's the purple 87%, which makes them really, really strong when they're in these situations where the person normally tries to stop you with Shuris. So you can just kind of abuse that. So these are fight command moves here, because I just want to slowly push up and try to abuse the height here. We see a banisher, we see a commander. And I can just drive him back and just shoot rockets at him. He won't be able to, once he's in the choke, he kind of needs to just run. So we killed Aiden's comm, and the other comm is here. If I know where both of those are, I can be a little bit more cavalier with my spiders. Once you know that like, okay, the commander's over here, I can just commit with my spiders and try to deal more damage. If these are units that are empable, I'd say it's probably not as good, but I know that there isn't, ideally, there's probably not any other commanders here. So I can just run like this and get on here, and then I can start killing all of his economy and everything else here. Yellow follows me in, which I'm actually not the biggest fan of, because if Shuris come, he just gets locked down, but he still wants to get in and try to do economic damage. So at the end of the day, that's a choice, and I think it works out here for him. I actually don't remember. So still upgrading all my mexes, right? I almost could have had more BP on this guy. And the other thing is I queue up this massive line of commands in part because I don't want to have to micro this, right? Like that's something I always preach, is just try to have really long queues, because I don't need to look back here for probably like a minute or two. And that just gives me more time to try to micro my front line. So I've been concerned about the front for a while, right? Our brown player is versus their blue player, which is like a massive OS mismatch. And my my teching player has some hounds out, and they've definitely been doing work, but eventually blue can just push up here and he can just crush and win, right? So an easy way for me to indirectly help this lane is push really, really hard so that I pull all the other enemies over to me, right? Generally speaking, it sucks to get rainbowed when there's like 5 colors in your lane, but sometimes it's the best thing to do, because if another lane is losing, for example, like if brown is losing and I push here, he'll have to respond. Aiden is under attack, he'll respond. But a lot of times like these units need to come over, or these units need to come over. And what that does is it gives the rest of my front line time to like finish building defenses, or to, you know, take mexes, or to do anything. So you don't want to donate units, but part of being aggressive like this is exerting map control, because you're going to force other players to respond to you. And it sucks because a lot of times like you lose the units, but there are times where it can be the right play. So yellow's going to come in here and do a little bit of damage, and my spiders are going to chill up here for the most part, and I'm just going to try to kill everything I can. And that was, so that's an example of the D-gun there. One of my spiders was a little low, but you can see he D-guns there, and it can't actually hit the spiders because it has the travel time, or it has like the travel distance up the cliff. So there is a Czar out. I want to try to be careful. And there are a bunch of Shuris here, which is super annoying. But even with all these Shuris, I'm not getting fully emped, right? The resistance is there. I ping for my air so that he can come and fight. I almost maybe shouldn't have done this call, to be honest, because I'm forcing him to fight on their side. But, you know, it's one of those things where sometimes when you're getting attacked, you just want to hit him with the need AA. Okay, well, he's going over here to upgrade these mixes. I am just going to keep building Weber spiders. So I do 2 recluse to 1 Weber. You just want the Webers primarily for reclaim, but you also want them for like it's great when they can emp units as well. My commander's chilling, and while I'm pushing forward like this, I still want to try to maximize everything I have. So like I took this 3.2 mechs, and I'm taking this mechs, and I think I've queued up. What have I queued up here? I've queued up a few mexes. Even if these die in like a minute, I still get an overall benefit from them. So I'm going to queue them up and then push. And I pout a little bit about the power of the rainbow because I'm getting attacked by a lot of colors, right? Light blue is here, dark blue is here, Aiden is here, purple is here. So there's like 4 armies here. But on the flip side, those 4 armies aren't in middle, which means it's breathing room for my team, and they can do things like start to pressure and kill other things here. So I will end up kind of sacrificing these, and I maybe should have pulled back sooner, but at the end of the day, I'm also exerting map control. And then here, once these units die, I basically just make a massive mistake, and I keep units queued in here. And that's pretty much something you never want to do, because none of these units are going to get any value. They're just literally going to die to like the massive army of 4 players that was here, right? So what I should have done is, as soon as this dies, I needed to run back. I needed to just like, I can keep all my units queued, that's fine, but I need them to not be queued into an enemy army that will instantly kill them. I'm literally just throwing away metal right here. So if you ever are in this position where you're like streaming units into an army, immediately stop. It is a very bad thing to do. Oh, and in terms of queues, so this will depend on your income. A lot of times you'll have like an early tick stream just for vision, but as you get more economy, a great thing to do is use your T1 labs as stopgaps for everything that your main army doesn't have. So if you need like fast kind of, you know, spam units, you queue up a bunch of pawns. I'm going to have 1 tick in rotation just for vision, and then I'm going to have anti-air via crossbows, and I'm going to have Lazarus so that I can eat all the reclaim or repair if I need to. So blue had flexed here, but now he's kind of flexing back, but that gave brown time to kind of get established, and I should have backed this guy up too. I think he's going to get Zard. Oh, maybe not. Zar might be on hold fire. Aiden might not be crazy enough to have a fire at Will Zar. Okay, so he's going to push, but this is kind of irrelevant, right? Even if I had like nothing else here, I can pretty much hold this with like my commander and just a D gun. But I actually have stuff here. With that said, well, here, let's watch me hold this and then we'll figure it out from there. So he's not going to push straight in. He's actually going to flex to the side. One concerning thing is my pork was good versus T1, but it's not great versus T2. And I haven't seen a lot of their tech player, right? I know he made a few hounds a while ago, but it's 17 minutes. A good tech player will probably have multiple APHIS. Well, okay. So in a perfect world, you have a techer who's a little bit more efficient, and at 17, he probably has like 2 APHIS or something. And that's concerning because my army will probably struggle a bit versus actual T3. So I'm going to swap from Weber Recluse, and I'm going to go Welder Sniper, because snipers can punch a little bit above their class. And I also know that Aiden is core vehicle, and core vehicle really struggles against snipers because they don't have great range, right? They have to use Quakers, and it's kind of easy for arm bots to exploit that. So I'm going to do that transition, but I'm also going to drop a pulsar right here. The reason I dropped the pulsar there is because when all my units are committed here, I want to ensure that I can kind of cover like that whole area so that if they do try to run things up, Or if like what's probably going to happen here, yellow needs to flex over here, I am still safe, right? This whole area is kind of protected. Pulsars have awesome range. I don't actually know if it's that far. Once it's built, I guess we'll see, but it's probably like that far. But essentially I'm protected not only against like smaller stuff, but like if a Razorback comes charging down the lane, my pulsar can actually help me fight against it. So I see the Tsar coming, and I'm going to walk my commander right to the edge of my cloak, right? So my commander is fully invisible. He doesn't, right? He's invisible because he's cloaked, and then he doesn't have a radar dot because he's in a jamming field. My snipers here kind of like do a bunch of damage to this Tsar beforehand, but you'll see what happens. Like he's pushing up, my commander can just walk out and degun, and then it's dead. And that's how you hold Canyon versus a bunch of stuff, right? Your commander is just there, you just degun whatever comes, and you're happy. Okay. I've got these, and I'm just going to queue up a little bit more E, or I'm going to queue up a lot more nanos, and I'm going to keep trying to scale a bit. But I want to get a force out here. I think actually, to be honest, this is probably maybe a little bit of a mistake for me. I'm at 133. I probably could have built a little bit of a stronger army first and then dropped this APHIS. But at the end of the day, I think I probably just wanted to queue it just to, yeah, just to be safe. And I also realized at this point that I don't have anti-nuke or anti-stealth like back here, so I'm going to build that. So banishers everything else. All right, monkey is pinging. We're about to finish all of these finally, and now he can build a couple scorpions or pit bulls and then build that, and I'm going to throw in some flak as well, right? So this again is just like, it's a super long queue, and hopefully he doesn't really need to do all of it, but all I'm doing here is like throwing down tier 2 pork so that if I get pushed from there, or if like I lose my push here and something happens, I can at least hold it with everything here while I'm producing units for my lab. And I'm going to drop a ton of flak here because I don't want this base to get bombed. And this, even though I've killed Canyon here, this is still one of the most common bombing routes, right? They'll bomb like this, or they'll bomb like this. And so if I just preemptively have the flak here, like we talked about before, then I can just shut down raids, or his fighters can fight above it with my fighters. All right, so yellow is already flexing over here to try to cover brown's lane. So once I see him do that, I need to start pushing, right? And I need to start pushing for a couple of reasons. One is if he's solo pushing and no one else is applying pressure, everyone just collapses on him, right? And there's no benefit to anyone. He just essentially donates this whole army. But if he pushes here and I push here, no one can exploit the gaps here because there won't be like a free army to go attack it. And one of us will probably have a little bit better battle, right? They can't bring like 4 players to fight one of us. They have to bring 2 players to fight each of us, ideally. So whenever possible, just try to make moves with your allies. And I see that my ally is spamming Maras, so I want to try to crack the front here. One small note is that whenever you make T3, or you're going to try to utilize T3, a really expensive push, if you have the full range of the map to choose from, like Orange does here, you always want to choose a lane that doesn't have its commanders, right? Aiden's commander died a while ago here, and Purple's commander died somewhere over here, although he may have been res because I don't see a corpse. Anyway, but like you want to attack where commanders aren't, because it's much easier to not get degunned and to actually have impact damage. So this is a little bit of a nightmare, right? I'm in a choke here with snipers, but I just need to slowly, I just want to like slowly abuse vision and then wait for the snipers cooldowns and just pick apart these units. You will notice that my snipers are not cloaked. That's on purpose. Cloaked snipers are similar to commanders, where I think it's like 25 energy a second if they're standing still, and then maybe 50 energy a second if they're moving. So it's not the end of the world because I have the energy for it, but it doesn't make sense for me to actually cloak them right now and burn a bunch of energy that I don't need to be burning. And so now we're just gonna slow push. And I don't have everything I need yet, right? And my main army has welders to frontline and for anti-spam, and it has snipers for all the other stuff it needs to shoot. But then I'm going to throw in anti-air bots just in case Shuris or something else or gunships come. And I'm going to have Lazarus behind, and the Lazarus can repair or they can just eat everything. And those are all just on repeat, right? I don't need to think about making anti-air. I don't need to think about making res bots later. I don't need to think about spam. It's all just automated through my lab. Can't talk. This is actually a huge mistake from me right here. So this is a micro mistake. These are on the same hotkey, and I issue a fight move command. And so all the units are going to move towards that, and then they'll stop and fire if something enters their weapons range. But you'll notice that radar bots and jammers don't have weapons. So if you issue a fight command with them, yeah, they'll just run in and die. So the easier way to do this is to have them on a separate hotkey, or you can just like have them guard the snipers or something else, but you never want them on the front because you don't want them on the front or in this hotkey. And the other problem is jammers actually disable. See how he's off? They disable when they take damage. So when he's on the front like this, if this pyro hits him with even just the littlest bit of fire, I lose my jamming, which is really critical if your snipers need to be totally invisible, aka cloaked and under a jammer. And so like a micro mistake like this will completely throw a game if the enemy capitalizes on it. So just try to be aware. And he's gonna throw his Maras in, and I'm just gonna slow push the other side, and we're just gonna come in like this. Oh, actually, I guess we didn't kill the other comm, but so here we go. And that's one of the reasons there why whenever possible you want to try to push lanes that don't have commanders. Good players will just fly comms over, but a lot of times you can keep them occupied. And so he lost like most of these Maras just to the commander being there. I think actually if the comm was a little bit closer, had been like here, that single comm probably could have just degunned every single Mara there. Oops. I actually don't even remember this. So this is a bunch of pawns, which aren't probably going to do anything, but you can imagine if this 3000 metal was given to, I don't know why this guy's making snipers, but was if this 3000 metal was like a Vanguard or was a Razorback, for example. So a Razorback is actually really scary into most of this stuff if there's spam with it. And so that's one of the reasons why you always just want to have the protective pulsar. Another awesome reason why you always want frontline pulsars is that pulsars have radar. If you look in the bottom left, they have 1500 radar range, but unlike jammers and all the other sources of radar that you would normally build on the front, pulsars cannot get Juno'd. So if you're in a situation where like you were spamming ticks and then they just repeat queued a bunch of Junos onto your front line and you don't have vision, you can always build a pulsar and then you will have radar. Oh yeah, and we were gonna look at the, yeah, so here's what that pulsar shuts down, right? I basically am able to assist this whole side in case anything big does come, or really in case anything comes at all. All right, we are slow pushing, but you'll notice that there are 0 corpses along the way. And that's because I had res bots in my queue. And this is actually a really important aspect of pushing. You never want to leave metal on the ground for area that you control. So when you push like this, you always want to eat all the metal behind you, because if you don't, and then you lose your army and they push back, not only do they get your armies reclaimed, but they get all the reclaim that was behind it, which is a huge problem. So as I'm pushing up, my res bots are just gonna, I can just hit E and just do an area drag, right? And I can just eat all the metal that's there. And there's tons of times where like, if you have T3 units or like even the recluse, I could just repair them. But I have these on a separate hotkey and I am just slowly eating everything there. And then we're gonna push it. And here I'm going to miss micro again with a fight command, and my AA bots were on that as well. So I kind of mess up a bit there, but we're going to run away from the commander. My snipers will snipe him. And we basically have one canyon at this point. And Aiden leaves. The green player leaves. So I think this is close to the end of the game. Yeah, they're going to resign in a second. So just to kind of like summarize, there was a lot of little things I tried to talk about, but just for the position as a whole, right? I'm red player. I want to go here because it's the carry position. It has the most mexes and it's a frontline position. I can play and impact the map immediately, right? I don't need to be in the back teching for 10, 15, 20 minutes before I'm legitimately impacting the map, right? I can actually just do stuff right away, and I can, you know, go help other lanes, or I can, you know, keep pushing my own lane. So that's the first thing, right? Think about your spawn positions and where the best place for you to spawn is. Second, you want to try to take your mexes as soon as possible, which is why I had those split. And you want to try to exert map control. You don't want to push into things that you can't claim. So I just came here and I porked, and then I put my army somewhere else. Timings, right? We want around 5 minutes E-store, around 6 minutes T2. After your first fusion, you want anti-nuke and anti-stealth. I actually kind of mess up here because I had them queued and then I canceled it. And you want anti-air not only on the front, even if it's just like a little bit of cheap anti-air, but you just want anti-air around, like after you finish your first fusion, or just a bit on the front line for a number of reasons. That is more or less it. Just as kind of like a simple sort of talk through of the game and the position. I think there's probably some things I miss, and like when you're watching it, you notice that there's tons of mistakes I do. You don't need to play perfectly to win games. You just need to like do your best and kind of do everything you can. So I probably could have scaled less and won sooner. That's just like a personal thing for me. I tend to overscale, and it's not necessarily a good thing. It can be a bad thing actually, but I was dropping fusions when I probably could have made more units and potentially ended the game sooner. So that's just one of the things. And a huge thing there that I talked about that hopefully you guys can kind of like bring into your own games is, if you're holding here and you have units, your units need to be going somewhere else and doing something else, right? When my units were here, it kind of lets yellow flex. Or if I'm pushing here, I bring a bunch of other players to come fight me. And that can be a good thing because it means that my front line that was weak isn't going to get pushed, because the yellow player who was here can flex over and all the other players are going to react to me, or some of the other players are going to react to me. Anyway, that's it. If you have questions or statements or anything else, just leave them in the comments, and have a good one.